all, and welcome to the second episode of Architect Roundtable for the RIBA China Chapter's Women in Architecture Digital Nexus program. I'm Leonhardt, an architect working in Chapman Taylor and also the Honorary Secretary of the RIBA China Chapter. It's a great pleasure tonight to host this roundtable with distinguished guests. So at the table we have Madeleine Kessler joining from the UK, who is the co-founder of Unscene Architecture. Hi Madeleine.
Hello.
Hi. And then we have Binke Lenhardt, co-founder and partner of Crossboundaries.
Hi.
Hi.
And then Qi Shanshan, founder of Studio Qi.
Hi. Hello.
Very nice to finally meet you, Shanshan. Right, and we are delighted to have Ken Wai, who is the Global Design Principal at AIDAS and RIBA Council Member for Asia and Australasia regions, and the Honorary Chair of our very own RIBA China Chapter to join us to offer support for the Women in Architecture program. Thank you very much, Ken, for joining.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Right, so I would also like to thank Yumi Liu, RIBA Head of Development China, Chloe Settler, who is online today to offer support from the RIBA. She is the RIBA International Program Delivery Manager. And thank you very much for supporting and participating in this event. Welcome all, and thank you very much for joining the roundtable. So now I would like to invite Ken to give an opening speech for the event. Please welcome.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Thank you. How should I start, actually? I think nowadays the power of female architects in the design realm is not anymore questioned. Therefore, I am particularly excited to have three top creative minds from United Kingdom, Germany, and China together in this forum to discuss contemporary challenges to our female professionals. The legacy of female architects with I think RIBA dated back to the end of the 19th century, started with Ethel May Childs, a graduate of the Bartlett University College London. She was the first woman to be admitted to the RIBA and won the silver medal in 1905. Elizabeth Scott, who graduated from the Architecture Association, or the AA as it's known, was the first female architect in the UK to win an international competition for her design for the Shakespeare Memorial Theatre in Stratford-upon-Avon that still stands today. And there's also Dame Jane Drew, another graduate of the AA and partner of Maxwell Fry, the modernist, who had huge influence in the Chandigarh master plan with Le Corbusier. Also, M.J. Long, who was involved in the British Library with her husband, Colin St. John Wilson, and designed the National Maritime Museum in Falmouth in Cornwall. So these are many famous female architects who are RIBA members who work in the UK. So what about today? What are the contemporary issues and solutions that are particular to our current female architects, and have the challenges changed since then? And we are we're definitely looking forward to hear the thoughts and feel of how they are actually working in the current environment as female designers in our profession. Thank you. And now back to you, Anne.
Thank you very much, Ken. So our theme today is to showcase the creative design power of women in architecture and discuss how diversity and equality in architecture profession can contribute to a more creative future of design. Our guests today come from a variety of education and professional backgrounds, from the UK, Germany, and US, and you have all practiced in China. I know Binke and Madeleine, you two have worked together in China many years ago, correct? So I'm quite looking forward to your interactions today. And Shanshan has worked in many high-profile practices in the US and Europe before starting your own. So I think with your rich and diverse experience, I'm sure we can get some unique insight into these topics today. Right, so without further ado, let's get right into the first session of the roundtable, which is Ask the Architect. So Madeleine, you've achieved quite a lot in your career so far. You're awarded the 2019 RIBA Rising Star Award, and you're also named in the Architects Journal 40 Under 40. You co-founded your own studio, and you are the co-curator of the 17th Venice Architecture Biennale this year. So can you please share with us your design concept for the British Pavilion this year, and perhaps give us a sneak peek of your curation as it's going to open in May, right?
Yes, thank you very much for having me here today. It's so lovely to particularly see Binke again, who I worked for many years ago. And I shall now share my screen to give you our pavilion for the Venice Biennale this year. It's called the Garden of Privatised Delights. And it's curated by myself and Manoj Verghese, and together we've co-founded Unscene Architecture. And the Garden of Privatised Delights, it really found its inspiration in this painting by Hieronymus Bosch called The Garden of Earthly Delights. And what we loved about this painting is how it's set up as a triptych. So you sort of have the heavenly sort of world on the left, this sort of hell on the right, and then this frames the central middle ground of Earth in between. And so our starting point for our proposal for the pavilion was to uninhabit this painting. Uninhabit the painting. At which point there was this quite startling moment where when you take the activity out of the painting, you see all these amazing green landscapes, but you suddenly really understand how important human activity and life are to bringing spaces in our cities and urban environments to life. And then we re-inhabited the painting with our interpretation of privatised public space. So we were looking at the kind of utopia of the commons on the left, so before the Enclosures Acts of the 18th century in the UK, and then this dystopia of total privatisation on the right, and then this middle ground that we're sort of all living in today in the UK of privatised public space. And this triptych sort of really helped us to understand what's often quite spoken about in a quite binary way. It helped us to engage in that kind of middle ground. Often people talk about this topic as good versus evil, public versus private. But what we're trying to say is that we're actually in this very complicated mix of private and public. So how do we as architects sort of navigate this middle ground to open up our public spaces and allow them to be more accessible and inclusive? And so really the pavilion is all about this central panel. And our concept for the pavilion, it came out of a brief that we taught together in 2015 at an Architectural Association summer school. And that brief was really looking at the pub. We were really interested in the pub as an interior privatised public space. Often when people think about privatised public space, in the UK especially, they think about it as these privately owned public spaces, or POPs, which are these kind of grey paved areas and new developments. And we were quite interested in how actually it's not actually a new thing, privatised public space. It's something that goes back in the UK for generations, and the pub is sort of at the heart of this almost. You know, it's the original public house. It's the opening of someone's living room to allow the public in. For the price of a pint, you can use a toilet. You have an extension of your living room. It sort of offers these real kind of communal uses, but at the same time, pubs are closing down up and down the country because they're just not financially viable anymore. And so we were looking at how can you reinvent the pub for the 21st century to make it a place that goes beyond just a watering hole, and somewhere that's really sort of the heart of communities and can actually survive. And out of that, we started to look more and more into the kind of concept of land ownership and these thresholds between public and private. And this is a study by Guy Shrubsole and Anna Powell-Smith called Who Owns England? It's both a book and a website. And what they've done is they've tried to map the land ownership in England and Wales. And it's very difficult to do because it's not until quite recently, actually, that it's been compulsory to track land ownership on the land registry when some property is sold. So often you've got privately owned land in the UK where it's not common knowledge as to who owns it. So there's over 5 million acres in England and Wales that's not actually on the land registry. And so there's a real lack of transparency of land ownership, which becomes really problematic. And often, even when you do know who owns that piece of land, it's owned by an overseas company. So there's real lack of transparency that we became really interested in, and how that kind of becomes sort of a physical entity in the city. So in 2011, there were these Occupy London protests just near St Paul's in London. And the protesters were originally in this sort of central square called Paternoster Square, which feels like a public space. But it turns out this space is privately owned. It's owned by the Mitsubishi Estate Company. And so those protesters were sort of ushered on and told they couldn't protest in this space. And it becomes quite scary when you think you're on public land, but actually you're not, and you don't know until you've broken the rules, and suddenly you don't know what the rules and regulations are when you're walking around a city. And the GLA, the Greater London Authority, are trying to now develop a public London Charter, which all kind of privately owned public spaces will need to sign up to ensure there's a common set of standards, to make sure they're sort of free for everyone to use, they're accessible and things like that. But it's quite it's quite weird that you don't know actually whose land you're walking on a lot of the time. And so we're interested, sorry, I think something's going a bit strange with my slides, but yeah, we're interested in these kind of the non-physical barriers, but also the physical barriers. There are a lot of really physical barriers in our cities which prevent access to what could be amazing public space. So, for example, access to green spaces, which has really been heightened over the past year where we've all been in these lockdowns. And a lot of people are very constrained to sort of apartments without any outdoor space. And there are kind of green spaces in the city that no one can access. So in central London, you have these garden squares, which used to be used by all the residents living around them, but now it's often just office blocks, and you can only access them if you've got a key. So what happens is most of these garden squares, they're often quite empty with no one in them, and everyone has to sort of sit around them or walk around them. And in World War II, a lot of the railings were taken down around these garden squares and melted to be used as ammunition. As a result, these garden squares sort of opened up and allowed anyone in. But after the war, the railings were reinstated by English Heritage. So we're quite interested in how there's these kind of physical and non-physical thresholds and how we can start to open them up and break them down, and what the architect's role within this is. And so within the pavilion, there are 6 rooms within the British Pavilion, and we've transformed each one into a sort of immersive installation that takes the form of some kind of privatised public space or a suggestion of what we can do to open up our land. And we've invited different room designers to collaborate with us on each of these installations. So the Garden of Delights is about the Garden Square, and that's by Unscene Architecture. Publicani, which is looking at the pub, by the decorators. The Ministry of Collective Data, that's looking at how we can make the ownership of data more transparent, by Built Works. The Ministry of Common Land, which is looking at bottom-up approaches to land ownership, by Public Works. High Street of Exchanges by Studio Polpo, looking at the future of the high street, which is a very big discussion right now in the UK, especially following all the lockdowns. And then Play Without Grounds by VPPR, who are looking at how there's just nowhere in the city anymore for teenagers or young people. And you can find out more about each of these spaces on the British Council's website, where we've got a series of short films about each of the themes, and sort of delves more into the topics. And then the pavilion, it's sort of currently being installed. And so yeah, this is the pavilion, which is currently being installed, and we hope to sort of see you all there when we can. The exhibition opens at the end of this month and it runs until the end of November. So thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing this very creative idea. I really love the painting and how you started with a painting and then taking the idea out into a real installation, interactive, immersive installation. I really hope I could visit the Biennale this year, but because of the crisis that we're all in, it really is a shame.
Maybe I can start with asking a question to Madeleine. I'm so happy you explained this so nicely, because I did some research and I wasn't so clear about it. So many of your projects are actually focusing on public space, but the privatized public space. So, and now you are curating or co-curating the British Pavilion. So how has this success actually influenced your practice? So how was the impact, or maybe you can share with us some milestones on the way, and also explain us a little bit more about the founding of Unscene Architecture.
Yeah, so well, I mean, Unscene Architecture was born out of this project, but Manager and I have been collaborating on projects together for a number of years. So we met at the Architectural Association, where we both studied our Part 2. And since then, we sort of followed quite different routes within architecture, but we kept coming back to collaborate on sort of teaching workshops for the National Saturday Club and summer schools at the Architectural Association. And I think we really found there was quite a powerful collaboration, because we had quite similar kind of ambitions in how we wanted to see our public spaces open up, but we were coming at it from very different approaches. And so I've been much more sort of embedded in the practice and policy world, doing a lot of work with the National Infrastructure Commission, looking at how architects can become more embedded in sort of strategic decision making, and then at the same time working for studios in London, such as Studio Weed, where I was working on sort of public realm projects, and looking at how we can better open up our public spaces and work with landowners to sort of allow the public in. And I think something that's been really powerful in this project as a whole is just how collaborative our team has been. It's been a huge team, because we've invited all these different room designers to collaborate with us, and it's just been amazing to have all these different ideas that sort of, I don't know, developing together. Yeah, I guess just at the same time really challenging the role of the architect, because often I think our industry can be quite insular, and I feel like we all understand that we can add so much more to a conversation than just the physical building, but people outside of our industry often don't see that. So it's how can we actually use our skills to allow landowners and strategic decision makers and the public sector to really understand the power of bringing in architects into the conversation earlier. And yeah, I think architects are great communicators, and that's often something we don't realise because we're surrounded by other people who think and act like us. But it's so powerful, the fact we can just sketch and draw and bring people around a table like that. And we found in the research in this project, we've been speaking to kind of developers and landowners, to policymakers, to local community groups, and often there are these really aligned visions and goals, but everyone's trying to get there in these silos. And so we really feel like the architect's role is to bring these different groups together around one table, so that we can open up and really transform these spaces.
Thank you, Maddie. I think it's a very interesting growth path, and then a learning curve in your past experience working with transport and infrastructure, and then later on leading to your interest in the public realm. And then I wish you all the best with your newly established studio, Unscene Architecture. Right, so I would actually move on to Binke. I've got this question. So I find the core concept of your studio, Crossboundaries, fascinating, as architecture is growing to be an even more multidisciplinary profession. So how did you form this design ethos almost, and how do you cross the boundaries when you're designing for a project?
Thanks, Enran, for the question. I will open the presentation. So, yeah, this is a picture of the staff of our studio. So our name is Crossboundaries, and our name is also Program. I could also say we practice by name. So this crossing boundaries can be interpreted in many ways, but for us diversity is very important. So we have a very diverse team, which you can see here on the picture. So, and when we started our practice in 2005, we noticed that there is a lot of separation in the architectural profession. So whenever we started to collaborate with somebody, basically we found out that they are working in a certain field, like, you know, they're either doing construction documents or construction, or they do interior, or they only do offices. Whoever we tried to work with, they were all specialized. And our understanding of architecture is different. We think architecture should be multidisciplinary, and this diagram also supposed to show. So basically there are a lot of topics here listed, like you have architecture, interior, landscape, and for us we try to do more than one of these in a project. So sometimes we do more than one scope, we do several scopes, and while we are doing a project, we are engaging with the client and actually try to extend our scope even further. So now I'm quickly showing two projects and explaining the scope we had for these projects. Since we don't have too much time, I'm not going to go into much detail here. So this is a fashion complex, or you can also say it's a factory. So it has a lot of functions. And we started with the architecture on this project. And what you see here is the outside of the complex. And on the left, very distinguishable, is the storage. And this storage, or this distribution center, has almost no windows. And on the right, you see a lot of windows in the building wing, and that is because there are people working behind. And then if you look inside of this complex, you can see this canyon, which we also call inner landscape. And this canyon was developed with the purpose to actually cross the boundaries, so that people could move from one building part to the other and cross actually this open deck, so that also white collar and blue color could match, because you have offices and production line together. So, and the client understood the richness of this deck and also started to use it for their own evening events. And so this is something which explains, if you do more than only architecture, then what can come out of it. And then we were lucky to be also commissioned for the interior. And so we anticipated this lobby to be more than just a lobby or welcoming space, but to also function as an evening event or for a fashion show. So this is what the client is doing nowadays. They are hosting regular IMA fashion shows in this lobby. I'm now coming already to the second project. This is the Chaoyang Future School project in Beijing also. And interesting about this project is that it was, it's not a newly built, but it is actually a renovation project. So we were called in to renovate this existing art campus. And again, here for this project, we were lucky to also do the interior. So what you can see here on the next picture is a concept of a flexible island, which we introduced because it was an existing building. You had to deal with existing structure. You couldn't do very much, but we were still able to implement a certain concept in the interior. And we also were able then to do the landscape for this campus, even though a year later. So this is also a good example for a project where we extended the initial scope. We at the end also did the signage. So for us, this is very important to kind of do the project not only from one perspective. So and now I'm kind of wrapping up the projects with one slide explaining that for us it's important to do all kinds of very different projects. So on the left top you can see a project out of prefab. Basically the majority of this dormitory is made out of prefabricated elements, and the same accounts for this little project next to it, the Infinity 6, a temporary pavilion also made out of prefab. Then we do signage, what you can see on the left. We do product design, and then on the right side you can see an urban development on top of an existing building. It's an existing maintenance yard for subways where we do a public park. Then we have a couple of interior projects and also projects in the rural areas, newly built projects. So, and after practicing all these years, we noticed that we need to maybe add another diagram in order to explain our practice better. So I normally try to explain this diagram as a 3D diagram. So as we in architecture, we work a lot with plans and drawings, and this is basically 2D, but this diagram has the idea of explaining that we basically defined areas outside of architecture, and we defined those areas with education and community building. So we developed a couple of projects around our practice, and you can see those projects here. So if, for example, we have our summer social, and this is an event where we invite the community in to celebrate with us. We normally utilize our own space for this. Then we have the design thinking studio, that's the big image in the middle, where we use the designing method or the design thinking method to help children to solve problems in a creative way. So this is something we do at the moment, and we also started this around 4 years ago. And then we are also engaging in city making, and we have another event which runs aside, which is called Live with Less, which is about swapping clothes. So the next few slides explain how we do this workshop in our space. So this is one of these design thinking workshops where it was about exploring the neighborhood. And this also happens, of course, sometimes with adults. Here it's about a tour through the city explaining, you know, the old fabric, the hutongs, etc. And then here it shows how we went out with students to see an exhibition and to basically explore what was shown in the exhibition. So and this is basically where we are today. So all these activities I explained at the end, they basically form a base and they feed into our design practice or into our architecture practice. And that's where we are at today. And we called this Boundaries X. And this is also now a new part you can explore on our website. Yes, thank you.
Great, maybe I can follow up a question for Binke. Yeah, because I know your company for many years, and I know your partner through many architecture friends. Now I finally meet you. Yeah, it's great. I feel comfortable. Yeah. So you do have a very diverse professional background, working in the U.S., in Europe, in one of the known local design institute in China, and now you have your own studio. So have you witnessed or experienced any boundaries that limits women from fully realize their creative talents as architects through your experience?
This gender differences definitely is a topic, and that's why, of course, we are also discussing this today, and why it's you know, discussed in public forums. I have to answer this more from my personal perspective, because it's very hard to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. So my professional life kind of started, in Europe, and then I went to the US. And by that time, I was much younger, so I don't think I was very sensitive towards this topic, because I always felt myself being in the learning position. And so, of course, I looked up to whoever was, above me, no matter if it was male or female. So, so I think I had a very good experience in the US, and I have a very positive memory. But and then when I moved to China, I noticed something which I didn't experience before, and that's something which is maybe quite different from Chinese women practicing architecture in China, because I'm a foreigner first and foremost, and this is also how I feel perceived here in China. And so for me, the phenomena is that wherever I go, the first reaction is kind of that I'm foreign and that I'm not Chinese, and then maybe the second part is that I'm a woman. So and I think in my profession, this double package, I call it now the double package, is kind of a positive joker, because for example, when I go on the site, first of all, there comes this reaction, oops, there is a foreigner, and then second, oops, she's also a woman. And then, when I start speaking Chinese, then they are all confused. So, so for me, that has been a very powerful tool, even though I didn't really do anything towards it. So I think this is something I wanted to share, because it is different, because even though it maybe shouldn't be, but because I'm not Chinese, and then brings us again back to this equality. So after all, we are then not equal, because I'm not Chinese. I don't know. This is it's a very complex question. So I think after observing this by myself, I do think that at the end, we first and foremost should be seen as professionals, and not as a male or female or Chinese or Western or anything. So this is just kind of my perspective on how I experienced to being a female in this Asian environment, a foreign female in this Asian environment.
Thank you, Binke. I think you're so right. Like there shouldn't be any boundaries, and everybody should be seen as just genderless, nationality-less professionals in the professional world. So really, there shouldn't be any labels or bias, and conscious bias or unconscious bias, and any prejudices. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I think many people don't realize that, and it's so kind of embedded into our perception, actually, that you just almost like an instinct that you think that way. So when you see somebody, you have that first perception or impression. So thank you.
I would say, hearing from the last two guests, especially from Binke, who I know works in China, crossing boundary is really almost a topic of working as a female professional, working to different countries, different cultures, background. It's very important that I think work is the most important thing, that questioning the status quo is very important for architects. And just like Madeleine earlier, talking about public space and public realm, whether we can redefine what public realm really is, once we realize that there are certain spaces, which I lived in the UK for many years actually, there are certain public spaces you can't get access to. That's quite amazing that there is actually very important topics that architects can actually pick up and actually raise the profile to ensure that we as people using spaces and architecture can truly understand what we can do as designers, and I think social responsibility in terms of being socially responsible can help to improve the environment itself.
Thank you, Ken, for your support. Moving on. Shen, first of all, congratulations on winning the 2021 Female Frontier Awards. Like Ken, I really like your work and admire your education background, from Columbia University to Harvard GSD, and you've also done a PhD with Pritzker Prize winner Wang Shu. Your studio is very unique as well in that you set up Studio T independently and as a leader of a design team who are primarily women. And one of your successful projects, the Ansel Hill in Yunnan, received 2019 AIA Architecture Award, and it was completely designed and constructed by women, which is very unique and unusual in the industry now. So can you please share with us the story behind this project? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, I didn't realize I once had an all-female team until I made my speech at the LEAF Award ceremony in Berlin, 2019. But now we do have male and female architects and designers in office, which is quite nice balance. We cannot have all girls. It's going crazy. Yeah. So let me share my my desktop right now. So yes, Ansel Hill is a very unique project. It's situated in Heshun ancient town in Tanchong, which is near the border of Myanmar. It has a super narrow site, squeezed by other shops, restaurants, and boutique hotels. And the client asked me to design attractive architecture, which is to say a beautiful facade to attract visitors. But I did nearly the opposite strategy, going against the fact that the slope is so steep. We push down the facade, actually. This is a strategy we use. So there's no facade for this building, or there's no two-dimensional facade. And I often question, why does architecture needs a facade anyways? So now the roof meets the street and the ground directly. And by doing so, we, in return, gained a public space for the neighborhood, which is rare in this very busy visitor walking street. And we're able to see the nature again in the back, which you can see from the photo, which superimpose the architecture to form a new reading of a vivid elevation. And now there's a breeze coming down from the forest. And this is the far image. So you can see it goes up 100 steps, over 100 steps to reach the top of our site is the white building, and it well connects to the mountain. And yeah, I like to share this photo. This is a sort of, goes back to my memory as a young girl. I live in Hangzhou, beautiful city. There's a West Lake in the city, and there are mountains around it. So there's mountains in downtown city. And as a young girl, I always climb up the mountains, and the natural forces of rocks and stones acts up on my body. And I think this is exactly how architecture could interact with us, such natural force. So this is almost the strategy that I took from my memory as a young girl to interact with the site in Tanchong, which is very similar. The way the town relates to nature and architecture. And from the left, you can see how it cuts into the street in the town, and the right images are the we call flying corridors, leading you naturally meandering to the rooms. This is actually the interior. It's a double ground system. Again, we're moving up the programs like restaurants or breakfast areas or coffee shop in a topographical strategy rather than orthogonal. And this is the room, again, moving the body. We keep moving the body to shift visual directions. And this is the entire project, which you can't really take a full photo from any angle besides a model that can show because it goes over 30 meters high. And this is the image that I love. Yes, it's a whole woman team, women designers. I had women designers working in this project, with female interior designer and women builders from the town. Most of them cannot even read, but they do all the labor work. They put all the bricks together. And the way we communicate with them is not through drawings, because they were saying, we can't even read. How can we read complex architectural drawings? Yes, I say, yeah, of course. So the strategy that we use to communicate with them is just to say, you go up with the slope of the hill, where it ends, you end. So this is how we interact with the earth, the ground. And this is how it reminds me of how we are connected to our land in a way. And of course, the client is also a woman, so it's a woman-run business as well. It's a very nice project, all built and run by women. And this is the second project I like to quickly share with everyone. It's a project that we did in deep Qingling Mountain. Very, very large mountains, and it's right in the middle of it. This is a cafeteria for young soccer girls. It's a quite unique program, because I don't know how much faith we have in men's soccer in China, but we have a great women's soccer team here. So we put a lot of effort, I think nationally. And this project, we want to build a physical place for raising the awareness of inequality for young girls in rural areas, so that they could go to school here and also play soccer and may have a future in the professional team. So the site used to be a horse stable, super long, over 100 meters. But I think it's perfect for cafeteria, so you can race and run for food, right? Race 100 meters. Although it's super long in elevation, but in short section, the size is just like a regular house. So we use the strategy of a house inside of a house, and we created family-like environment for all these young girls who live in school and practice every day with light well, day and night. And here you have all these girls eating, lining up for food, and and it's done in a team uniform, which they're excited. Every time I see them, I was so happy to see them to eat in the cafeteria that we create. And this is a very very low project, a low budget project. So we try to do our best to create something like home for these girls. And some of these girls actually, we took this photo 2 years ago, and some of them were already selected for the province team, and some even goes to the national team. So I wish the best luck for them.
That's such a nice story, very inspiring, Chen Shen. Thank you for sharing, especially with the Unscene Hill project. It's almost like a case that stands against all sort of bias against women, just to show we can just do it without men, to be honest, just us.
In far China, in Yunnan province, all women work. Like they do all the heavy work. They build buildings. They can use their body to carry the doors. And the men sit around and smoke and talk. They don't do anything.
Yeah, I know many, I think, ethnic groups or small villages, they are actually female-dominated societies rather than what we have now. So it's very interesting to see how things work on the other side.
Yeah, thank you so much for your presentation. Absolutely loved it. I feel really empowered after seeing all these amazing women who you're working with. And I suppose I just had a question for you, because you've led your team on so many, like to work on so many of these remote and challenging sites that you're showing us. And besides the sort of physical challenges and the harsh environments, what do you find are the sort of main obstacles that are coming your way from having such a female-dominated project team? And how do you overcome these obstacles?
Yeah, I do work in Tibet a lot. I have been there for over 60 times now, just for architecture trips. So maybe I can share my screen again. So this is the project that I continued from 2017 till now, 16. So over 4 or 5 years now that I've been working with Songzan. It's almost like Aman, the high-end boutique hotel chain. They do tours. So we built one place by another place to connect Yunnan to Lhasa. And this site is located in over 4,000 meter altitude, and this is like an impossible project to do because of the altitude. Builders, men, cannot even work there, especially interior, because we use interior builders from Jiangsu province who cannot handle this altitude. And what we do there is also very careful work, very sustainable, eco-friendly work, because we have to first respect the glacier. This is the glacier that you see, and it's going back away 50 meters every year because of global warming. It's the third largest ocean glacier on Earth. And there's also the village behind it, even though it's like a 4 or 5 house village, very, very small. So even we're building a very small building, which only has 20 rooms. That's a very small lodge. But over there, it's a gigantic building. So the strategy we took is to sort of tuck into a cliff. So from the village side, you can only see one level. But from the other side, you can see the entire glacier. Just to do that, so we have to use a modular system since we cannot build on site. So we did everything in Shanghai, manufactured the entire interior in Shanghai, and then we move it to the site. So it's almost like the movie Up. I was on site when all the modules were driven there. You know, just like movie Up. Whoa, this is a Christmas gift, a house, a room flying to me, which is a very amazing process. But this project took 2 years. We worked with, I counted like 18 different countries with French, with Germany, with all different ethnic groups, and all men team. We only have 3 women on this team, a design woman in my company, and another woman in Shanghai factory. But we all went on site at the very end of the day. And this is how it's situated there. So for the entire Songzan projects, yes, I do work with a ton of men, Tibetan men. And I lead different groups. I lead the entire the clients group, architecture building group, 3 different interior building groups, and then our own carpentry shop. So it's me with over 100 men. And but I think this is the best experience I've ever encountered. They're so respectful, and there's just a lot of respect that they're listening to a very small woman going there. This is another Songzan project. Look at the scenery. It's almost like Switzerland. So I was saying, you know, because of COVID-19, you cannot go to Switzerland. You can go here. And this is what we built in Tacheng. And this is the one project that we just finished in front of the Nanjiabawa mountain. So you can see the site, construction site on the bottom, then the mountain on top. And this is how we finished it in February. This is one of my friend, on site, and this is how it looks like now.
Fantastic. You're building all the way from Yunnan to Tibet. That's amazing. I've been to Yunnan once and I suffered in the first few days because of the altitude.
Yeah. I talked with the client by mine. I said, why don't you choose a man? But he was joking. First of all, he said, Shanshan, you're a man. He always said to other people. But second of all, he was saying, no male architect can ever handle, going in such fast speed in Tibet. Just climb, because he's Tibetan. He's used to fast walking. It's almost like running on the mountains in very high altitude. And he was like, no other architect can even have this they don't exercise enough to catch up his fast-paced race. Yeah.
Was that actually coming from your growing up, climbing many mountains in your youth, and then you kept that as a habit to keep yourself strong?
Yeah, I do boxing.
Oh wow, that's why. Okay. So now that we've spoken about boundaries, challenges, obstacles, and then I think we demonstrated how strong women can be, as designers, as professionals. So maybe perhaps it's more important to ask the question: how to encourage and empower women in architecture, to allow their creativity and their potential to thrive. And what do you think, professional bodies like the RIBA, AIA, or the German Architects Association, and the alike, what can they do to help?
I really loved it when Binke said earlier that we're professionals first, because I often feel slightly conflicted if I'm called a woman architect, because I'm like, no, I'm an architect. But at the same time, I think I came into the profession quite naive, not realising how male dominated it was, and I think how many little things happen that then really do start to kind of grate on you and grind you down, whether that's going to site and finding that the women's toilets is used as storage, and therefore you can't go to the toilet, or just like comments like going to site and getting asked out on a date as a joke, like as part of the banter and stuff, and all of that, like it makes funny anecdotal stories, but at the same time it does start to really grate on you and grind you down. And I know that something I found really helpful has been being a part of all women networks. Like in London, there's an all-female network called Urbanistas for women in the working environment, in the built environment, and another one called Part W. And I've just found the kind of mentorship and being able to kind of share stories and challenges, and when you have moments of self-doubt and things like that, being able to share with other people who can help support you and sort of guide you on your way. And the other thing has been also, I think I've really looked up to certain women in the industry who've sort of been like role models. I still don't think there are enough female architects to look up to, but there's certainly been like Sadie Morgan, for example. I found her quite amazing in the way that she sort of supported younger female architects, and I think that kind of mentorship and supporting one another and recognizing that it is different for us in this industry is really important. And I think also we have so much to offer as we have a different perspective of the city and of the built environment.
Yeah, so mentorship is really important for female designers or any female professionals to grow from first out of the school to someone who's really matured and very capable in what they do. I remember, Shanshan, you told me that you were inspired and encouraged by many of your mentors who are women as well.
Yes, but they're all in the US. That's a difference between the US and China in current situation. back in the U.S., when I went to the GSD, when I was at Barnard, I went to all girls women's college. And it's a collaborative Columbia Barnard architecture program run by Karen Fairbanks. She was a chair. She set up the department, and then we had Sarah Whiting. Then we had Toshiko Mori, who actually called me to told me that I got into the school. So I was very influenced by my female professors. So they are all my mentors, far and near. But coming to China, so now I teach in school. The two schools, university that I teach, I can say I'm like the only female studio critic. Well, one of the very few female teachers in school. And how can you set up a mentorship like that? That there's nobody lead that. Yeah. Well, when I set up a mentorship with my students, maybe I can be the beginning of something. So this is what I worry.
Many you teach as well. I know at AMA. How are things there in terms of?
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were talking, Shanshan, like I think in the UK you do get a lot of women in academia, but I tend to teach on quite technical courses because my background's originally I studied engineering, and so I tend to teach technical studies. I teach in a tectonics course at the London School of Architecture, and a lot of the female students say to me that they didn't realise they could engage in the technical sides of the course. And they just thought that, they'd always had male tutors, and they just thought that's just something that men do. Like, men go into the more technical side of architecture and women stay on the more conceptual side. And I'm trying to show them that, it's all interwoven and it's not really one thing or the other. And it has been really interesting. I think a lot of it I found is just giving them the confidence that they can do it and intuitively they know things. And that it's all about just practicing and testing ideas. And I do think, I know it's a bit stereotypical, but men just often do have this kind of inner confidence just to go for it. Whereas women, they often think, unless they've done it before, they can't do it. And Manage and I thought that when we entered the British Pavilion competition, we didn't think in a million years we'd win. We did it as a test for when we'd enter it properly. And the whole competition, we were just like, well, this we're just testing this out for when we do it like properly in the future. And it was so stupid because for some reason we thought, and we were like, well, we've not curated a pavilion before, so therefore we can't win this. Then why would you have curated the pavilion before? And it's something I'm definitely guilty of, and I think a lot of women are guilty of, just thinking unless you've done something before, you can't do it. And it's I think it's something we need to kind of the hurdle we need to get over.
Yeah, I think I would like to mention something I mean, what you just said really reminds me also of a little bit how I started doing things when I was younger, because I was the only one in the family who actually went abroad and wanted to do things outside of Germany, but the tradition is not really like this. Normally I wouldn't say even as a woman, but maybe you normally just it's a small percentage of people just leave their hometown or try things out. So I think this is something as we maybe talk here about, also encouraging women. It's just, I think you have to overcome a little bit the worry and try things out and open up your head and try to become independent, and then also be sure what you want to do and follow that path. I mean, this is, now we are talking towards each other here. I mean, this is probably not a recipe, but it's just something. I think for women it is a little bit harder maybe to find your path, but you just have to be very persistent.
Yeah, don't give up.
Yeah, so I think you're all very right. in terms of, women sometimes, like Maddie said, they need to see that it's possible before they can actually be brave to give it a shot. So I think maybe the message here is really to encourage all the women in the professional world to actually be bold and really push your limits and go for it. But also mentorship is so important, and that's why I think a panel like you all, this is very important, that you show a very good practice. You show a great example to many, not just to the designers, the architects, the females, but also to the wider, general public, to change their perception from bottom up, basically. And like Manny mentioned, in academia, in universities, many female students, they don't feel as confident to deal with technical course or problems as their counterparts, which sort of reminds me of some promotional advertisements done in the US about encouraging girls to actually go for science and engineering from very early on, from when they were in their childhood. So instead of giving them toys like, dolls, small pretty things, you encourage them to actually try, dismantle some a radio, a TV, give them, engineering-related toys, which would normally be given to boys. So I think, this whole encouraging the women in architecture or women in profession initiatives should really start young, from the teenage years, maybe.
I think it was such an interesting observation about starting so young, that we're kind of gendered, and something that's really interesting in the playground room in our pavilion, Play Without Grounds, that BPPR sort of picked up on, and there's some research as well by White Architecture called Places for Girls, and they were looking at how often when people design spaces in cities for teenagers and young people, they're for very active teenagers, usually for male teenagers, like basketball courts or skateboard ramps, and actually what we're really lacking is places for girls, and not just girls but also male teenagers who maybe aren't so active, and so it's like places just to sit and chat with your mates, like when I was a teenager, I think I just spent most of my time in a shopping centre talking to friends, like on a bench, and it's like those are the spaces that we're really lacking, and it's how do we ensure that we're not designing sort of for gendered spaces within our public realm and environment as well. And I have to say as well, looking back, I think when I came to work for Binke, it was the first time I'd had a female boss, and I thought it was quite amazing that you were like in this sort of, I think it made me take a step back. Firstly, I hadn't realised that everyone I'd worked for previously had been male, and I thought it was quite amazing that you were in this kind of world.
But I think also it's important to mention that these things really vary from country to country, from east to west, because I do feel that here at university that the girls or the young women are not so aware of this issue. I don't, when we have classes, then we are all together and they kind of enjoy this learning environment, and they're not aware that maybe when they step out of this university environment, that maybe that they're not sheltered anymore, that it might be different. So for me, it's also about, there is an environment which makes you very sensitive towards this, and there are other environments where you are actually kind of shielded. So I do think that China is still, at least that it's how it feels to me, but maybe I don't have the full penetration, but it is different. And so I think what is important is that people like us, that we also have to support each other and keep on doing what we are doing, basically.
I mean, in the UK, it's kind of a 50-50 intake into the universities of women and men. as you go on in the profession, there's suddenly huge
Yeah.
drop off.
In China,
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
we did.
I think
Sorry.
it's a problem that I think, you have 50-50 in school, and then when you turn 25, then 30, 35, 40, and keep cutting down. And I think it's the other way around, that females do give each other some excuse to back off in a way. Men sometimes they go forward for it. We sometimes would use family or architecture is a very harsh sort of environment in a way. If you go to the sites, you work late. There's a lot of excuse that we can use to back off. So maybe we can support each other to not being female to be an excuse. Not let it to be a reminder to backing off. Because I think work is work. It's not female against architecture as a profession. It's just work if it fits you as an individual. Because architecture is a combination of skills. It requires logic, creativity, very good working ethic, responsibilities, and all of those that women have, and even physical endurance in some way. I go to Tibet, but so I think it's not that we're weak in any way. It's just how you view this profession, the relationship with yourself. If it the program not as a full gender fits a program.
Yes.
Yeah.
I read an article a few years ago which I thought was quite interesting. It was saying that perhaps it's not women leaving the profession, it's the fact that the profession has actually got a lot wrong with it, and women are more willing to say this isn't right and just leave, whereas it's much harder for men to actually leave because men have also got all of their own issues that they're brought up in a society where they're supposed to be the breadwinner, or it's much harder for them to actually step back and say this isn't right. And perhaps it's about there being actually root issues in the profession that we need to change, like the working culture. We need to change it so that it's not about doing like really long hours, and it's not about doing lots of work for free. And these are issues that actually affect both women and men, and would be very beneficial to everyone to change.
Yeah. So the way of working in general, the industry environment has to change to maintain the difference for as long as it can. Right. So since we've spoken about students and influencing students, I thought it might be interesting to ask all of you, how do you get your creative juices flowing? As a designer, because some students, they just they might say that I'm just born this way. I'm just not so much a creative person, but I still want to do architecture. So what do they do? What's your advice to them?
Well, I think first of all, I think you have to be a curious person. I mean, if you're curious, you can also be creative. I think this is very important for me. And then I think it's this whole thing, how you live your life, like you embrace life, you travel, you get a lot of input, like you talk to friends, to people, to groups, whatever is outside, you observe, you kind of engage, and you go to museums. Basically you have to feed yourself. I mean, we eat food every day, but basically that's the brain food you have to give to yourself in order to also create an output again, because if you are empty, I mean, there is not going to come anything out of you. And I think what is also important, at least I think creativity is not something you have or you don't have. It's also a process. So you have to engage in this process. You have to discuss, and you have to, join maybe brainstorming sessions. And then out of these idea finding, there comes maybe an idea, and then in the next step you develop this idea further. So for me, yes, it's about brain food, and then, but it's also about this process. So if I have these two things, I think I can be unlimited creative.
Yeah, I think so too. I think creativity doesn't use up, but it actually adds up. So the more amazing place you go, the more you see, the more incredible people you meet, the more you study, learn, think. And the more creative and comprehensible you are. So I think I've become more sensible to creativity since I started a firm. Even though I've become busier and busier, I think I use up my brain, but we definitely have become more productive in creativity rather than use it up. So I don't think there's such a thing as using up creativity, but rather than just the harder that you work, the more creative you are.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, it is about curiosity for the world, and I always tell my students, I think a lot of it is about like finding your medium and your process, like finding the best way for you to express your ideas and develop your ideas. And there's no kind of one fits all model. You know, some people really enjoy writing, some people love sketching. I find collage a really useful tool because I just love the accidental moments of when you're just playing around, and those for me are the moments that then inspire you to kind of find new ideas. And I think often it is those accidental moments in life, which is why it's so important to like talk to other people and explore the world, because it's about sort of embracing the unknown.
Yeah, I sort of keep myself updated with all sorts of design industry and trends, almost like Binke, you know, your Crossboundaries ethos. So I think mixing up different design industries, get ideas from and get inspired from other designers is also a way to rejuvenate your own ideas. So diversity, which is basically diversity. You need to immerse yourselves in diversity. So that leads to maybe our final discussion topic, which is, I think we've discussed pretty much all of it, but why are equality and diversity important in the architecture industry? Maybe we sum up with this question.
Well, I don't think it's only important in architecture. I think our society in all should be, diverse and equal, and then only this way we will be able to tackle the future problems we will have. So I think, yes, of course, we just talked about creativity. So architecture is a creative profession, and we maybe when it comes down to what we do, maybe we design buildings, but I do think that doing this with a diverse and equal team is going to give us a better building. So that's how I would answer this for architecture. But I do think really that this is not related to architecture. This is related to the whole planet.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's so important, and like Binke says, it's part of a wider kind of conversation. But I think it's so important to be representative of the cities and the environments we're designing for. And I think that really comes out actually in the design of spaces when you realise that actually it's only been designed for one type of person.
Yes.
So it's not just about gender. It's about everything. It's about disability. It's about sort of every kind of diversity. I think we want to be representative of, and it would just benefit everyone. We'll have more inclusive spaces.
Sure, be inclusive.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think gender has difference only in the gender way. But work is work. If you're talking about industry or architecture industry or any industry, work is work. Work has its own character, its own drive, its own difficulties, and the responsibility. And if individual matches the work, particular job, then you choose for it. But as free. It should open up to anyone, to any amazing individuals who can contribute. So I think that's the diversity comes in, and that's the equality, allowing everyone to at least try and be creative.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you also very much. I think the key takeaway points from today's roundtable is that it's a two-way relationship, really. One is that the society, the world that we're living in, should be label-less, bias-less. So it should consider everybody, without all those prefix, and then just give all the professionals equal opportunities to grow without, differentiating them or segregate them into different groups. But also, it's on the other side. From women ourselves, we need to be bold, to push our limits, to trust in ourselves, and we need to show everyone that it's possible to be done. What's traditionally considered not so suitable for women, for a specific gender. So both sides has to work together to improve the situation, and in the end, maybe we could have a true equal society or world for everyone. Right. So again, thank you all very much for joining the roundtable. I'm really honored to be your host tonight. So the full recording of this event will later be published on RIBA YouTube channel, RIBA WeChat public account, and RIBA Architecture World app in China. So please follow RIBA website, Twitter, and WeChat, and stay tuned for more. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
It was a lovely night.
Bye-bye.
So nice to see you all, finally. Hope you enjoyed the conversations.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Nice seeing you again, Madeleine.
Yes, really nice to see you too.
Nice meeting you, Shan Shan.
Yes, nice to meet you.
Thank you. Bye.